Welcome to Wellsprings Community Church.
As it's about to be Simchat Torah, as I'd got my talit out, ready, as we're thinking about giving thanks, I thought it might be helpful to think about some things to do with this. And it's going to lead us on, believe it or not, in a few minutes to taking communion together. So, we've already thought with the children about the talit and about how it's worn by Jewish people. They might wear it as a prayer shawl when they go to pray, but actually they wear it lots more than that. Some wear it all the time, as that constant reminder of being under God's protection, of being under His love, of being under His wings, of the 613 sets of instructions, sets of guidance that it reminds them of. That physical feeling. If you've never worn this one, I know some people have at different times, try it on later on. That physical feeling of having it around you. And that feeling of, you can feel it. It touches you. It's there, it weighs on you. It's God's presence with you. There was one Jewish writer who described it as a portable spiritual home, which I liked. Because it's a tent, that's what its name means. It's a little tent. It's a place we go to meet with God. It's the tabernacle. It's all those things we could spend ages thinking about and thinking through. I just thought I'd show you, where does it come from? Where does this idea of wearing it and having it come from? Because believe it or not, it's a biblical one. We're under the canopy of love. There we are. There we are. Numbers chapter 15 says this. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations to come, you are to make tassels on the corners of your garments with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, and so you will remember all the commands of the Lord, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourselves by chasing after the lusts of your own hearts and eyes. Then you will remember to obey all my commands and will be consecrated to your God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." So there it is. That's why they wear these things. That's why they put the tassels on things, as that constant reminder. Because it was for the generations to come. That constant reminder of what's there. And remember, I may have thought with you before, like I just mentioned, about the kanaf, the wings. There are so many times in the Old Testament where it talks about being under the wings of God's love, being under the wings of His protection, and the word it uses is that description of the edges, the wings of one of these. But that command was a strange one. That command was a strange one because back at the time it was given, there was only one person who wore clothes with fringed edges. Because as you can probably tell, it takes a lot of time and effort to make fringed edges and then to tie them together in the right way with the knots that there are to make sure that there's the right number and things on them on these. But there was only one person in a country at that time who wore a robe with fringed edges. And that was the king. They're told to put, did you see it in that reading? They're told to put blue strands in. That's turned over the years into putting sort of whole bands across them. But originally it was just in the zitzer in the corners would have one blue one in the middle of them. Blue is an interesting colour. Because in nature, you don't get a lot of stuff that's blue that you can take and use as a dye. And so to wear something blue meant you were incredibly rich. Probably you were the king, because they were the only ones who could afford it. I've written it down so I could remember. They got the blue dye for dyeing clothes back then from snails. A particular type of snail they would kill and crush. And it took 12,000 snails to make one thimble full of dye. And so that's why wearing a robe that has fringed edges and is blue, or has blue colouring in it, meant that you were somebody very, very special. It meant that you were probably the king. You were incredibly rich. But what does God say to the Israelites? Wear one of these, because you're special. You're royalty. The way that I see you is the way that I would see a king. Have the fringes and have the blue. Because it says you're royal. You're a royal priesthood. A holy nation belonging to God. And you're to live in that way. Ooh. Jesus wore one. Not lots of times, several times in the gospel, we can see passages that show us that Jesus was wearing one of these. You've probably heard me tell the story before about the woman who was bleeding and touching the edge of his robe. That she touched his tzitzit, she touched his kanaf. If you were sick, especially children, but adults as well, if they were sick, they would take a tallit and they would wrap the child or the person who was sick in the tallit, so that when they prayed for them, they were praying that they were in that position of being under God's wings, under his love, under his protection, that God would bring healing to them. We mentioned already TGI on Friday. At the moment, the stories that we're doing with them each week, we're thinking about Moses. And on Friday night, we were looking at crossing the Red Sea and how they'd escaped from Egypt, and we'd thought about that on previous weeks, but they'd reached the Red Sea, and now they were stuck between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army that was coming to get them. But how God protected them. How he had that pillar of fire, and then how he had a cloud that put itself between the people and the Egyptians who were coming to get them. How he led them using those things, his very presence with them. There's an interesting section of Isaiah chapter 4 that says this: "Then the Lord will create over all Mount Zion and over those who assemble there a cloud of smoke by day and a glow of flaming fire by night." Oh, we remember that. That was going through the wilderness. That was the Red Sea. That was God's presence with us, protecting us and caring us and loving for others, loving us. A glow of flaming fire by night. Over everything, the glory will be a canopy. It will be a shelter and shade from the heat of the day, and a refuge and hiding place from the storm and rain. The pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, Moses and the Israelites then discovered it. Isaiah points it out to them there. Maybe we need to think about it as well. God's presence will be a shelter and a shade from the heat of the day, and a refuge and hiding place from the storm and rain. Because what is it? It's a canopy over us. Did you see when my 4 wonderful volunteers were holding up the tallit earlier? How it formed a canopy over the person who was coming. They would put them often on sticks to be able to hold them up high enough so that everyone could come underneath. So they'd have these wooden poles that they would lift up, and the tallit would be lifted up on the wooden poles so that it formed a canopy over them. Are you making your own links to things already? And a tallit is used as a canopy in another situation as well. Probably one that you may know already, but just in case you don't. At a wedding service, actually what happens is the man's tallit, the groom's tallit, here it's on a, teaching you all these words, chuppah. You may have heard of a chuppah. That's the sort of frame that they build to hang it up on. But actually, that's a modern thing. It would have just been held by people like that. It's placed over the top of where the bride and groom make their vows, make their promises to each other. The couple coming together. We use it sometimes even within New Testament writings, don't we? A couple coming together, getting married. It's a picture of God and his people coming together. It's a picture of God taking his bride and under his canopy of love, under his protection, under his wings, that there's that safety, there's that protection, there's that peace, there's that presence. Traditionally, the bride would come under, at that point, the bride would move from being under the protection and love and care of her dad. I know it's old-fashioned, is that the right way of thinking about stuff like this? We probably won't get away with saying some of these things today, but this is how it worked. They were under the protection, the care of their dad. And then that's transferred, and they come under the protection and the care of their husband. They exchange vows of love and commitment to each other. And the bride comes under the love and the protection and the guidance and the physical presence of her husband, under his wings. But always, as a reminder, it's a picture of God and us. Why does it talk about us being the bride and him the bridegroom in Revelation and places like that? Because of all of this. And just as God hovered over his people as they journeyed in the wilderness, just as God hovered over his people as they came to the temple, to his presence, so he hovers over the bride and the groom at a wedding. So he hovers over us. And it may not feel like it all the time, but he is. And he does. Protecting, journeying with, blessing. All of this then comes together in another little Bible passage that we're going to finish with. In Luke chapter 13. Why have I picked this? You'll see as we read through. At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, "Leave this place and go somewhere else. Herod wants to kill you." He replied, "Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal. In any case, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside Jerusalem." And then he gets carried away with this. Have you ever imagined what Jesus looks like at this point? The passion with which he speaks. "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often have I longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. And you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Jesus associates wings with protection and care and all those things, but then he also connects it with his death. And guess what's the last thing you do with your talent is? When you die, you get buried in it. It's your burial robes that you would wear. On the cross, and it's probably, sorry, just as an aside, it's probably the garment that's woven from one thing that they couldn't tear and they had to play and gamble for. Because that's part of the instruction, is what it's made from, and it can't be made from more than one material and all that sort of thing. But anyway, on the cross, can you see the picture language that's going all the way through all of this? On the cross, Jesus spread out his canopy of love over us. His wings of love spread over us so that we can know his presence. We can come under his protection. We can celebrate and be excited about his guidance and his instruction and living in that way. The sweetness of who he is for us. We can become royalty, wearing his robes instead of ours. We can be like a bride entering into a new life, a new relationship, a new place of protection and peace and care and love. Can you see all that's going on? And so what we can do this morning, what we can do every morning, is come back with that reminder of God's love for us, of what Jesus did for us, of the place that that then puts us. And I don't know about you, but there's only one response I can think of thinking about that place that that puts us. And that's to say thank you. Yeah. We could spend some time then thinking about how the attendants are able to hold that and cover other people, and other people can come under that protection and that place while we're holding it, but we don't need to go into that for now because we're thinking about communion. And we're remembering what Jesus has done. We're saying thank you to him for this amazing love that he has for us, for what he's done for us together and as an individual.